One reason I would say that we are interdisciplinary is because we actually encompass a number of different programs. So we have a degree in women's and gender studies. I'll come back to that in a moment. We have minors in sexuality studies, which includes, but is not limited to, LGBTQ studies. We also have the minor in disability studies. And we have a new minor starting up next year. We're very excited about it, in critical race studies. And in fact, I'm happy to be co-presenting with my colleagues because one thing about interdisciplinariness is that you are never so siloed, you're connected to everybody else. So we have a lot of overlaps of faculty and programs with human rights and social justice and with childhood youth studies. Just to come back around to who are we, what do we do? If you think about the women and gender studies, I think one reason we exist is because of feminism and because of the need to think in feminist terms about all of the disciplines and about social justice in the world. So I think you'll also find across our talks that a lot of us are interested, broadly speaking, in ways to address inequalities, in ways to address social difference, and ways to look at different identity categories that some of us may identify with. So it starts with women, but it moves out from there to think about gender more generally. So we don't just study women, we also study masculinity. We study transgender and gender non-binary identities. So we really question the way in which gender is used as a category to delimit us into boxes or not. And increasingly our work has become what is sometimes called intersectional, another one of those inter words like interdisciplinary. So in order to really do justice to the category of women and gender, we have found that we also need to simultaneously be thinking about race, to be thinking about class, to be thinking about religion, to be thinking about nationality, to be thinking about ability. They all connect. And so our institute is a way that students can think about all of those categories together and also learn a lot about their own positions in the world. Why are we interdisciplinary as opposed to disciplinary? Again, I think because we are relevant to any number of other fields. We're not separated out. So one of the great things about our classes is that students often find them very interesting and very relevant to combine with their work in other areas. And so that is another way in which we connect across the Faculty of Arts and Science, but also you could be a science major and find it really useful to look at the history of women in engineering, or to look at the way in which gender is studied or not studied. So it is a tool for thinking about all of the ways in which knowledge is produced. I wanted to have you, think about that. The ways that you could combine work in women's and gender studies with work in other fields. And then the other thing I wanted to say is just, if we had more time, it'd be interesting to hear what your experiences in high school have been, but we've been finding in our work with incoming students that a lot of them haven't had the chance to do any work in high school around women's and gender studies, although you may have had the opportunity to write a research paper, say, where you would be bringing a feminist lens to your work. And I didn't get to study women's studies in high school. I was an English major and I got a PhD in English, but I got a job teaching women's studies. And so many of us come from different paths. And part of our goal in doing this work at the university is to try to make it possible for students at other levels to, at the primary and secondary levels, to be able to do work around social justice issues. So I think our curriculums maybe need to change, and that's why we need more students doing work in these areas in order to take it out there to other locations. So to me, that's what interdisciplinary means as well, is that the work you do in your own field is relevant to the work that's going on everywhere. Okay, that's my little spiel.
So our program is actually called Human Rights and Social Justice. So the idea of human rights, sort of at a very basic level, is that the idea of rights that we have by virtue of being human, not exclusively rights that we have by virtue of, for example, being a citizen of a country. But as soon as you start sort of pulling at the threads of that idea, it starts to get pretty interesting and pretty complicated. And so the idea of human rights in lots of ways, in many university contexts and in the sort of popular ideas around it, has deep connections to law and to the idea of to sort of legal traditions. And in our program, we definitely are interested in the sort of legal systems, but we think about human rights much more broadly. And as I said, if you start pulling at the sort of threads of, well, what is it? Who is a human? That might seem like a very straightforward question, but actually historically, the questions are defining who gets to count as a human, and for what, in what kinds of contexts and for what kind of purposes, actually winds up being a pretty thorny question that touches on philosophy and history and politics and the ideas of nation states and all the kinds of differences among different kinds of humans that we say become socially salient for one reason or another, right? And how do those differences, the kinds of differences that start to seem very important between us, how do those become important, or how do they become unimportant? Or how do they feed into or form the foundation of really important questions around justice and injustice? So that's kind of those are sort of the big questions that courses in our program are interested in. And what I think is a real strength of the program is that our faculty come from really different disciplinary training. So we have people who are historians, who come from literature backgrounds, who do sort of work on culture, as well as more law or public health orientations to things. So it means that the kinds of questions that come up in around human rights, around things like what role does the state play in either protecting people or in harming people, right? In making those differences matter or making them unmatter, right? But these are the kinds of questions that can be asked and answered from all different kinds of perspectives. And how you ask the question has a lot to do with what kind of answers you get. We have a small number of faculty who, as I say, come from lots of different backgrounds and who sometimes teach the same courses, but from different orientations. But we also benefit from having connections with a number of other departments, including places like sociology, philosophy, political science, history, women's and gender studies, indigenous studies, where students in our program take courses that are offered by our faculty, but also from around the curriculum, and have a chance to explore many of these questions from lots of different perspectives. And to really, one thing I like to say to students is that there are no two human rights and social justice majors that are exactly the same, because there are so many different paths through the degree, that if you find that it's the law courses that really, or it's the sociology courses that really turn your crank, right? That you can sort of craft your own way, and you can focus on all different, like there are lots of different ways to sort of craft your degree. I think I'll stop there for now.
I think that Rebecca and Anne have both brought up a lot of points that relate to childhood and youth studies as well as an interdisciplinary field. And in fact, the study of human rights, I think, is particularly important to childhood and youth studies. I think many people don't recognize the sort of how deeply intertwined those two fields are, because much of the emphasis on childhood agency and sort of the the justification for why children should be a topic of study in the first place really emerged from the discourse of children's rights. And so, as Rebecca was referring to, this question of who gets to be counted as human, that's really a question also that has applied to the marginalization of children and to thinking about, to what extent can we engage children in larger society. And so that's really the question that initiated the field of childhood studies. It has a couple of different names. So it's called childhood studies, initially was called children's studies. And there's a bit of debate, actually. This is kind of funny with the interdisciplinary approach. There's a bit of debate about who the field belongs to, essentially, in terms of where it was founded. So the literature folks think that it belongs to them because they were studying children's literature and thinking about children's text for quite a long time. And the sociologists think that it belongs to them because they initiated this field of the sociology of childhood in the 1990s, which really is where the field emerged from. And my background is from education, and so I kind of think that it belongs to us because we've been thinking about children and childhood for a long time in terms of their relationship to schooling and the role of schooling in shaping the identities of children. So that's a little bit about how it is interdisciplinary. I think that's very true for all three programs, and you can certainly see a lot of connections among the sort of the aims that we have in terms of being social justice oriented. And I want to point out too about our program that it is a completely revamped program. So it used to be called Child Studies. And that name really resonates more with some of the earlier roots, the predecessor, I guess I would say, of childhood studies, which is more focused on developmental psychology, which is a more, as you mentioned, Anne, it's a more specific field with a very particular focus. But childhood studies was initiated in order to bring a more uniform approach across a variety of disciplines. And so from the beginning, when it came about in the 1990s, it wasn't just sociology, which is also kind of an interdisciplinary discipline, I guess, in a way, but it was, many different disciplines across the arts and the humanities. So it's social sciences. It's, we have people who look at the history of childhood and youth. I myself do cultural studies, so cultural analysis of childhood. We have people who study specifically gender identity, in thinking about the role that gender identity plays in the formation of childhood identity. So there's so many different ways that you can look at it, and it's just a really interesting and dynamic field, and it's really a fun field to be a part of because it's still new. We're just a couple decades into this, and there's so much room for growth in this field.
I mean, I must admit, as a developmental psychologist, I think we could probably learn a bit from incorporating some of these multiple perspectives in the way we approach things. But so I'm going to move now to sort of maybe just a little bit of chat about the kinds of courses that you might actually be taking if you're in any of these programs. So Anne, we'll go back to you. Maybe you could talk a little bit about either some of the new minors that you're offering, what those courses might look like, or some of the core women and gender study ones as well.
Yeah, they connect, and it's been really interesting to hear my colleagues speak as well, because they've also reiterated some of the ways in which work in these fields kind of allows you to do some of everything. So our major and our minors begin with our introductory first year course, which actually many students who aren't majors and minors take as well. As I say, this work is very relevant to whatever your major might be. A lot of people actually do a minor in women's studies or other areas, again, to combine it with work in psychology or work in sociology or work in one of the other areas. So in that introductory course, we also are in the midst of some revamping to reflect the fact that we are now an umbrella for sexuality studies and disability studies, which in fact we're in interdisciplinary studies. The terminology gets very confusing. Again, I just try to emphasize we're all connected. And so we've been trying to, we're revamping our intro course in order to give people an entry point onto all of the areas that we cover. So it's great because you would take that class and learn a little bit about sexuality studies, disability studies, critical race studies, women's and gender studies, again, as connected. The rubric of social justice I find very useful for thinking about the work that we are trying to do in looking at questions of social inequality and difference. And then from there, you can specialize a bit more and take one of our second year courses that are gateway courses onto the different areas. So there's a critical race studies course, a disability studies course, a sexuality studies course, but all of them again connect. So we hope that one of the great things about being in an interdisciplinary field is that, again, as Rebecca was saying, you know, no two majors are alike. So there are many paths, not one that's prescribed. We do hope that people will be afforded, students will be afforded an opportunity to do some kind of independent research project. It could be, we're very interested, for example, in community engagement, looking at activist organizations, looking at all of the government organizations that are here in Ottawa, looking at the archives and the museums and the art galleries. So being able to bring a critical lens onto any range of topics. So that's another element, I think, of the training that we're trying to achieve, particularly in our more advanced courses, is to empower students to take these tools and run with them in the direction of wherever you're living or wherever your interests lie. It all connects. And I'll say also that we partner with many different units. So while you could look at our website and you'll see here are our core faculty, they do cover an amazing range of areas of specialization and interest, but we also regularly partner with or offer courses through other units. So you have benefit of being able to, let's say, take a course on transgender cinema with my colleague Laura Horak, or take African feminisms with Shireen Hassim, who's our Canada Research Chair in Gender and African Studies. And there's a constant infusion of new and different courses into our inventory, which count as approved electives towards your major. So it really does give you a lot of flexibility to mix and match and to combine.
Super, thanks, Anne. Rebecca?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, echoing Anne a little bit, we have a sort of umbrella of categories of courses, some of which are offered, some of which are offered by our core faculty, and then we have identified courses offered from around the curriculum that satisfy our requirements. And the way the degree is structured, we have, I think, a nice balance of required core courses that are offered by human rights core faculty that sort of help students develop a sense of community with their classmates, get to know the faculty who will be with them throughout their 4 years here, 3 or 4 years here, and sort of develop some shared language with each other around, you know, what it is that we're studying. And I find, as someone who usually teaches from the 2nd through 4th year, I always love seeing the students who I had in a 2nd year class again at the 4th year, who've really, you know, been through classes together and have a real rapport with each other, and a sense that they've been in a conversation with each other for several years. And at the same time, we have, we call them the thematic groups, which are five groups that are sort of key themes in human rights, things like laws and institutions, a category we called critical principles, just sort of, you know, concepts that core debates in the field, marginalized groups and identities. I won't go through all of them, but the idea is that students have to take at least one course in each of those areas, so they get some sense of the breadth of the kinds of questions that get asked. But then there are many more courses in your major than those 5 groups. So if what you're really interested, if the courses that you find yourself really drawn to are the ones that are under the umbrella of environmental justice, for example. You could take a course that we teach in human rights about environmental justice, as well as courses that are taught in sociology, in geography and environmental studies. There's lots of different resources in different areas of campus that could satisfy your interest. And it's a way that we give you opportunities to sort of go deep on particular questions, but also to make sure that you get some sense of the scope of the types of concerns that we have in the field. I'll also say that I think I really appreciate that we limit our fourth year classes to pretty small seminars. So by the time you're in your fourth year, you'll have no more than 20 students in a class, and it'll be a seminar. And those are, I think, really valuable. We also, some students have the opportunity to take a small seminar in their first year as a way to satisfy our core requirements. So I think there's a lot of opportunities. There's lots of different ways to do it, and there's a lot of opportunities to connect to classmates and also to faculty in different areas.
Thanks, Rebecca. And I'll just note that although some of these first year classes that you guys offer are fairly large because people all over the place take them, the actual program in terms of the number of majors is quite small. So there I'm assuming can be sort of a cohort effect, that there's a group of students, unlike psychology where, wonderful program, but there's 2,000 students. You're not going to get to know all your classmates kind of thing. But these interdisciplinary programs tend to have a smaller number of majors. So I think that gives you a chance to sort of get to know people a little bit more as you move through the program. Julie, what are the classes like in childhood and youth studies?
Yes, well, I'll just say for childhood and youth studies, we have, right now we're running around 100, a little more than 100 students in a year cohort. So we have about 500 students altogether in the program. And so just to give you an idea of how in the early years of the program, the classes are larger because there are fewer of them. And so they're designed to sort of get everybody through those core requirements. And then, as Rebecca was saying, in the third and fourth years, the classes become smaller and you kind of get a chance to get to know your classmates a little bit more. So in our first year, we have a 1 credit all year course called Introduction to Childhood and Youth Studies, which is designed it's designed to replicate in some way the first year seminar experience, but with a large class. So it's built around academic success. We work on writing skills and research skills, information literacy that are specific to childhood and youth studies. And we've really designed the program to sort of scaffold your learning from that very first course into the kinds of like writing assignments and the expectations that we would have as the program progresses. And so in that course, you have an opportunity to get to meet every faculty member in the program. We all come and guest lecture in the first year course so that everyone gets a sense of the different kinds of approaches that we bring to our own research in childhood and youth studies. So I think we love to be able to have everyone take a first year seminar, but since we're not able to do that right now and have everyone in small classes, we try to create a small class feel within a larger class. And so that's the first year. And then the second year, everyone takes the research methods in childhood and youth studies in the fall. And so that's, again, a larger lecture style course with tutorials where you learn about the research methods and approaches to interdisciplinary research in childhood and youth studies. And then in the winter term of the second year, we offer a course called Experiential Learning in Childhood and Youth Studies that is designed to be kind of a precursor to other kinds of experiential learning opportunities like the practicum that we have in the third year, as well as the honors research project, which you can do in your fourth year. So those are some of the other experiential things that we are able to offer. And that course it was designed to allow for like volunteer experiences and actual in-person experiences with children and youth. Right now in COVID, we're having to be a bit creative with how I teach that course. So I've had to sort of readjust my expectations in terms of what experiential learning means, but hopefully we'll be back to a more normal approach to that soon. And then in the third and fourth year, we have some students who do a general degree and finish in their third year, more students who complete the honors degree. And in the third and fourth year, there are just a whole bunch of thematic courses that look at a lot of different issues within childhood and youth studies. We have a course on children's rights. We have critical approaches to child development. We have literary representations of children and youth, children's knowledges, cultures, and representations. There's so many of them, I can't say them all, but they're all very interesting and they're all very thoughtfully designed in order to provide a really broad perspective on the field.
Super. Thanks, Julie. So I think that we're kind of at 6. So what I'm going to do is give you each a minute now, just to sort of just a few highlights of what you might do once you graduate with a degree in this. Now, there are obviously no specific jobs at the end of a BA, but some of your students, I'm going to get Julie to start, some of your students might have some ideas when they're in childhood and youth studies, what they might want to pursue when they're done. So can you just touch on maybe a couple of paths that they might follow?
Yes, absolutely. So we do have a lot of students who intend to go to Teachers College, and that's something that we take into consideration when we design the program. But we also realizing that you know, how the job market changes over time, you really don't know how things are going to be in terms of whether that's going to be the direction that majors want to take with their degree. So we try to design the program in a way that would appeal to a lot of different jobs. So we have students who graduate to work at nonprofit organizations. We have graduates who work in refugee settlement. We have graduates who work in policy or who work in governmental organizations that have to do you know, that support programs for children and youth. We have people who work in recreation, even in hospitals in sort of facilitating programs for wellness for children and young people. So there's a lot of different opportunities, but certainly at the question that Caitlin asked, is it something that you should consider if you're looking to be a teacher? I think definitely so. We have many graduates who do decide to go on to Teachers College. And it's ideal for those that are looking to teach primary, intermediate, but also those who are looking more to the higher grades or even secondary. We just recommend that you get a secondary field as your minor, so a teaching field as your minor. And we've designed the program with lots of flexibility for minors. And so there's plenty of space for you to take as many courses as you need to satisfy the minor. So hopefully that helps.
That's great, and you answered the question as well. Awesome. So, and we'll come back to the questions. I just want to get through everybody's sort of a little bit of a spiel on what happens next. So, Rebecca, what might you do with a degree in human rights and social justice?
Sure. I mean, many of the things that Julie said also apply for our students. I'd say that the one thing that she didn't mention is we definitely have a lot of students who are interested in law and do go on and do law school afterwards. Also, social work is in terms of professional fields that students pursue afterwards. Law, journalism. We have a lot of joint majors between journalism and human rights. Social work, and then the sort of policy world, nonprofit sector. One thing that's I think neat is that our students also do form a bit of an alumni network for each other. And in Ottawa, you'll find you know, human rights students sort of or graduates dispersed around the kind of ecosystem of the nonprofit sector a little bit, and also throughout the country and the world as well. So. And then we have quite a number of students who pursue academic, like graduate degrees in a whole range of fields following a human rights major.
Super, thanks, Rebecca. Anne? Oh, you're muted.
Unmute. I kind of just want to piggyback on the other two and say, yes, ditto. This is the way in which it's good that we're all presenting together because there are a lot of overlaps. So our students go on to do any and all of the things that have been mentioned. Because Rebecca just mentioned grad school, I'm gonna just also mention that we do have a graduate program. And in fact, some of our undergrads go into our grad program to get an MA, and then from there go on to PhDs in a range of different fields. So we really do, open out. But I wanted to just mention one thing because I'm trying to be brief, one kind of a career path that I think the work that we do in all of our programs makes possible, which is to equip students to enter the workplace with a really keen sense of how to do equity, diversity, and inclusion work, which I'm sure if you've been following the news at all, the focus on Indigenous sovereignty right now in Canada, the focus on combating systemic racism. These are the kinds of social issues that we're aiming to equip students to be able to go into any kind of group, but especially workplaces, but really anywhere where you gather with people. How can you be sure that that space is accessible to people who may not identify with the gender binary, people who may have disabilities of one kind or another. So how do we think about ways to make our social spaces and our workplaces work for everyone? And how can we ensure that we are not just in say, a white people bubble or a privileged by class bubble? This is where teaching is so important. And so that is one tool that we aim to provide all our students, and students who major or minor in our programs are going to get a deeper knowledge of that, but it's something that I think we contribute across the board in order to be able to create better spaces for all of us.
Super, thanks, Anne. So clearly a really wide range of possibilities from these interdisciplinary programs, and I'm just going to open it up now for questions. And I notice, Julie, I don't know if you have probably seen, but there's a couple of questions specifically about childhood and youth studies. After graduating the fourth year honors program to become a youth psychologist, therapist, social worker, would the next step be a master's in psych and education? Would that be sort of where you would go after that?
Yeah, I can address that question, actually, Lauren's question and also Emily's question, because
Sure.
I think my answer is somewhat related. So I give this advice. I talk to a lot of students in my office, well, in my Zoom office now, about their aspirations for what they'd like to do with their degree. And one of the things that I always tell them early in the program is, I know that it's hard. You're already thinking ahead to university, and now I'm asking you to think further ahead to graduate school. But it's important to do, because actually what I've learned by looking at different requirements, entrance requirements for different programs, is that it does vary from institution to institution what degree a particular program wants you to have in order to be eligible for the program. So one example would be social work. There are programs that you can enter for a master's in social work that would not require an undergraduate degree in social work, but other programs do require the undergraduate degree. And so it's important to be thinking about where you'd like to go for your graduate program if you're thinking about a field that requires an advanced degree. And just looking at what your options are, so that you'll know going into the program that this is a suitable degree. Because, unfortunately, this would be a great practicum project for someone, is to assign them to do the research on all the different things that people are interested in and find out which programs require, which degrees. Maybe that's something that I'm going to put that in my thinking cap for later. But they do vary widely from institution to institution. So I would just encourage you to do the research, make sure that going in, before you decide on an undergrad program, if you'd like to do something that requires licensure, that requires advanced preparation, make sure that this is the path for you, because we can't guarantee that it would be right for every institution. But I will say that I know personally of graduates who have gone on to get their master's in counseling, who have gone on to pursue child youth counseling and therapy with this degree, but it might not be the case at the particular institution that you're interested in. So just check it out and kind of get a sense of it before you decide.
Super, thanks. And I think that would be the case for, again, from a psychology perspective, we're a bit pickier in psychology. You have to have a psychology degree to do like a clinical psychology postgraduate work. That doesn't mean it's the only path to counseling, but you want to sort of know ahead of time what it is that you're interested in doing. So is it possible to do 2 minors in the childhood and youth studies program?
Yes, it is possible. It is not easy, but I have definitely seen, like just this year, I know a student that graduated with 2 minors. So it is possible, and the new program especially has a lot of flexibility for electives. So if you are thinking of 2 minors, I do tell students, and all of you are thinking about this program should think about this as well. Because of the new design of the program, electives are very heavy in the first and second year. There's less space for your electives, and there's some, but less in the third and fourth year. So I encourage everyone to be exploring the minors that they're interested in that first year, so that you can go ahead and be taking classes towards that and really focus on getting your minors taken care of in your second year. But definitely it's certainly possible. There's plenty of hours in terms of room or space in the program to do that.
Super, thanks. Would childhood and youth studies undergrad count as an equivalent to an undergrad psychology degree? I can answer this one. No, it wouldn't. So as I said before, psychology is picky. They won't accept somebody to a master's in psychology unless you have a psychology honors degree. I'm not saying that's right. That's just the way we roll. So you'd want to be, I mean, you could do child studies and do a minor in psychology and get some of those courses, or the other way around. Certainly, we encourage students to do minors in all sorts of things, because it does open up your perspective on what you can do and what you can learn in the undergrad. If I'm planning on going for a double major in gender and women's studies and psychology, would I need to apply to both programs or only one program and then choose the second one at a later date? And you can take that if you would like.
I was going to punt it to you.
Okay. So you don't have, you certainly could come in as a double major. I would recommend that you come in one of those two majors and then try it out while you're here. You can certainly add a major or a minor once you've made your way through first year. First year is really a time of discovery. As Julie was saying, you have that full year course in child studies. You might have a first year seminar in women and gender studies, or human rights and social justice, which is a small class, but it lasts all year. And everything else is pretty much what you want. So first year is a good time to sort of sample different things that, you know, I never took a course in this. What is this like? And you never know, right? My daughter is a journalism grad from Carleton, and she took an African studies course in her first year, and it totally changed her world. She picked up African studies as a major. She went to Africa. She did a master's on African studies. So you never know. And she wouldn't have told you in high school that she was interested in that topic at all. So first year is really a time to kind of try things out.
And I will add to that to just say we do have a lot of students who are double majors, and it's an interesting question because I think it speaks to the way in which all of our interdisciplinary programs do, as I said, combine with other things. So I think it's very common that we find that we have students who are double majoring or who want to add a minor in women's and gender studies or one of our other areas to a major. And we welcome that because, again, for me, it's part of the nature of our work and the success to have it travel everywhere and to have students mix and match. In terms of specifics, as Anne's suggesting and Bowker is suggesting, first year is a time to experiment. And I think that is why our first year course is quite large, because it is a gateway to so much. So in a sense, you wouldn't have to make your decision up front, because you could easily take our intro class, combine it with whatever you need to do for your other major, and then at the end of that first year, and we do have our undergraduate advisor and all of our faculty are very willing to help advise students personally for you to figure out how can I best combine my different interests, because part of the nature of interdisciplinary work, as we've been saying, is that it's not one track, and we're used to that and used to being able to help give students advice on how to pursue the studies that are going to best suit you and your wide range of needs.
Yeah, for sure. And I think just to echo that, something like 60% of students change their majors at some point during their degree. So I know you think that you have to have it all sorted out before you even start. And some people, you know, stay in the same degree program, but you need to be open to possibilities. And so take that one course that you never thought you'd be interested in, and all of a sudden a new path opens up, kind of thing. So something to keep in mind. Okay, I don't see any new questions in the chat. We'll give you just a minute if somebody has something else, but I'm conscious of time. Thank you so much for joining us. Oh, a question here. To do the master's in most psychology grad programs, your developmental psychology program would be the best path to take. If psychology is specifically what you want to study later on, then yeah, you need to do a psychology degree. But again, sometimes people are, well, I want to help others, I want to do counseling. There's a number of different paths to get to that point. Go ahead.
Oh, I just think this is so interesting. And thank you everyone for being here, because we've been trying to figure out how to co-present. And I think we're seeing for ourselves some really interesting issues that come up. But And I'm interested in the comments you're making about that more specific trajectory into psychology from a psychology undergrad degree. And I'm realizing it's why I have worked with a lot of students who've gone into social work, because of an interest in helping different communities that they identify with. So they may be LGBTQ and they want to do law in order to help with those issues. They may want to do social work. And I do think it's a bit of a problem that disciplines like psychology can be very siloed like that. And I think our work is important for helping students identify places where we need to make social changes and then finding places where they can go following that. So
yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, I think generally as a university, we're way too siloed, and interdisciplinary studies kind of leads the way, I think, not only in the faculty, but at the university, to sort of get people to think about disciplines in a different way. So
I see one more question from Olivia about the Global
yeah,
Women's
go
and
ahead.
Gender Studies, and happy to follow up with you at any point, but yeah, glad you brought up. We do have this program called Begins, which allows students to do work in global and international studies. A lot of the work within women's studies is also global and transnational in focus. But I encourage you to read more about the Begins program, because it does allow you to do some study abroad work and other kinds of special programs. So it does afford some special focus, but you can find that within the regular degree as well.
Okay, thank you so much. Again, for all of you, thank you very much to our panelists. I wish you all the best of the rest of the high school term, as well as the rest of the university term. Ours is going to be finished before yours, but I know that there's a lot of extra work going on in the next little while. So thank you so much for joining us. If you do have questions, don't hesitate to follow up with any of the speakers. All of that information is available on the FAST website in terms of who's associated with which program, or the admissions webpage as well. So thank you again, and I'll let you get back to your families and whatever else you were doing for this evening, but very much appreciate you being here with us tonight.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for
Bye,
coming.
thank you.
It's
Bye.
great.